If you look up self-care online today, you are almost immediately hit with what feels like an incredibly expensive secondary job.
Oh, totally.
Right. I mean, it's endless lists of these 14-step evening skincare routines or high-end retreats, color-coded wellness planners, and, morning rituals that require waking up at like 4 a.m.
Yeah, the ice baths and the meditation caves.
Exactly. It often feels like we're being asked to build a space shuttle just to earn like a single moment of relaxation.
Well, the barrier to entry for simply taking a breath has been artificially inflated. I mean, we've essentially commodified peace. We turned it into an industry that often creates way more stress than it actually relieves.
Which is precisely why today's deep dive is pivoting in the complete opposite direction.
A very necessary pivot.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a YouTube transcript today from an English learning channel called English Ace. It features a wonderfully simple dialogue between two people, Leo and Miss, and they're discussing how to focus on yourself. But because it's designed for beginners who are learning the language, they strip away every single piece of that wellness industry jargon we are so used to hearing.
There is a unique power in that kind of linguistic constraint. Like when you can't hide behind complex terminology or, biohacking buzzwords, you're forced to look at the raw mechanics of human well-being.
It really exposes the foundation of what our brains and bodies actually need.
Exactly. It strips it right down to the studs.
I'll admit, when I first read through the transcript, the advice sounded almost frustratingly basic. Eat well, get enough sleep, take walks in nature.
Right, the stuff we've all heard a million times.
Exactly. But the mission today isn't just to repeat those basics. We are going to explore the underlying neurobiology of why our brains physically require these seemingly simplistic inputs to survive the modern digital age.
Yeah, because we want to find out how you, the listener, can apply these stripped-down basics to escape the constant information overload we're all drowning in.
So, if we look at the core of their conversation, Leo and Miss define self-care as doing something that is strictly for you. Not for your boss, not for your family, but for you.
Yeah, and they frame this as being your own best friend.
That specific phrase really stood out to me, but I have to admit it also immediately brought up a lot of friction.
How so?
Well, we're often so fiercely protective of our best friends, right? If my friend is exhausted, I will practically order them to sit on the couch, I'll bring them tea, I'll give them endless grace.
Sure.
But why is it so incredibly difficult to direct that exact same energy inward? Like, why are we so comfortable being our own worst taskmasters?
It really comes down to a fundamental difference in how the brain evaluates the self versus how it evaluates others.
Okay.
When we look inward, we're typically viewing our actions through this deeply ingrained lens of productivity, obligation, and internal expectations.
Like a running tally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your brain is keeping a running tally of every flaw, every missed deadline, and, every social expectation you just haven't met.
So we're essentially auditing ourselves constantly.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You're always under your own audit. But when you look at a friend, that productivity lens drops.
Right.
You view them through a lens of sheer humanity and compassion.
Mm.
So by externalizing your relationship with yourself, by deliberately imagining yourself as a third-party friend, you bypass the cognitive bias of your own inner critic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a psychological trick to hijack your brain's natural empathy and apply it to the person who usually gets the least of it.
You. That completely reframes the entire concept for me. You're stepping outside of your own internal audit to grant yourself permission to rest.
Exactly.
But if we accept that premise, the immediate hurdle becomes, well, how do we actually spend that time without defaulting to just, doom scrolling on our phones?
Right, the default setting for most of us.
Yeah. So Leo and Ms. discuss active hobbies, and I want you to notice the scale of what they suggest. For reading, Ms. mentions she likes books with beautiful pictures where she can just look at them and feel relaxed. It's just you, a chair, and a book.
The key mechanism there is sensory engagement without cognitive strain.
Without cognitive strain.
Right. A book with beautiful imagery is a visual soothe. In our daily lives, our visual processing is tied to high dopamine, screen-based scrolling.
Which is exhausting.
It is. It keeps the nervous system on high alert. Looking at a physical book forces a slower, much more intentional visual focus. That actually signals to the brain that your immediate environment is safe.
They also talk about walking in nature and the impact of music. Miss Jine listens to happy pop music when she wants to feel energized, but she switches to slow piano music to calm her mind down after a busy day.
That is a textbook example of rhythmic entrainment.
Rhythmic entrainment.
Yeah, so your brain waves and your heart rate naturally want to sync up with the dominant rhythm in your environment.
Oh, interesting.
So by deliberately choosing the slow cadence of piano music, you're using auditory input to physically slow down your cardiovascular system.
You're kind of hacking your own heart rate.
Exactly. You're taking control of your internal physiological state through a very simple external lever.
Okay, I follow the logic there, but I have to challenge one of their other examples.
Go for it.
So Leo talks about his favorite hobby being cooking. He makes simple things like pasta with tomato sauce, and he treats it as a time to clear his mind. He focuses on chopping vegetables and stirring the sauce.
Right.
But for a lot of people listening, especially working parents, making dinner is not a quiet hobby.
Not at all.
It's a loud, chaotic, high-stress chore with, like, kids screaming in the background. How does cooking pasta actually translate to self-care in the real world?
That is a very valid distinction.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between cooking as a stressful chore and cooking as self-care lies entirely in whether you can achieve a flow state.
Okay.
If you're cooking while answering emails, breaking up arguments, and stressing about tomorrow's presentation, it's just labor.
Just another thing on the to-do list.
Exactly. But if you can isolate the activity, even just the 10 minutes of chopping vegetables, you engage a neurological process called transient hypofrontality.
Wait, transient hypo what?
Hypofrontality.
Walk me through what that actually means in the context of chopping onions.
Sure. So transient, meaning temporary, and hypofrontality, meaning a decrease in activity in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, the prefrontal cortex.
Right, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making, worrying about the future, and that inner critic we talked about earlier.
Ah, the auditor.
Yes. When you engage in a highly tactile, focused activity, feeling the weight of the knife, smelling the tomatoes, hearing the sizzle in the pan, you flood your brain with immediate sensory data.
And because the brain is busy processing the smell and the sound, it doesn't have the processing power left to worry about tomorrow's meetings.
That's the exact mechanism. The human brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly running simulations of what might go wrong in the future.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Tactile hobbies act as a cognitive anchor. They pull you forcefully into the present moment. The prefrontal cortex gets to temporarily shut down. So for the busy parent, the goal isn't necessarily to make cooking a meditation, but to find any small tactile task, whether it's gardening, like mistending to her balcony plants, or sketching, anything that demands enough physical presence to quiet the prediction machine.
But even if you manage to find a hobby that triggers that flow state, it feels completely useless if your time is constantly hijacked by other people.
Oh, absolutely.
The dialogue anticipates this beautifully, though, by shifting from what we should add to our lives to what we have to actively protect.
The boundaries.
Yes. They bring up the trap of saying yes. Your friend asks for help, you say yes. Your family needs you, you say yes. And suddenly, your time is entirely depleted.
This is where we really have to look at the evolutionary psychology of why saying yes is our default setting in the first place.
Why is it?
Well, humans are profoundly social creatures. For early humans, being helpful and agreeable was quite literally a survival strategy.
If the tribe liked you, you didn't get left behind to starve.
Exactly. Saying no subconsciously feels like a threat to our social bonds. We equate yes with being lovable and, essential.
Which makes saying no feel inherently dangerous even when we are totally exhausted.
It feels like a risk.
But Ms. offers a very practical script for this in the conversation. She suggests learning to say no nicely, using phrases like, "Thank you for asking, but I need some time to rest."
It's direct but kind.
Yeah, it completely removes the defensiveness.
It does. And if we want to look at this structurally, boundaries function exactly like a firewall on your computer.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Without a firewall, every external demand, every request from a friend or colleague acts like a pop-up ad draining your system's RAM.
Until the whole system crashes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually, you have absolutely no processing power left for the baseline tasks that keep you functioning. Without the word no, the time for that flow state simply cannot exist.
And if we're talking about system maintenance, that leads directly into how they discuss sleep. They highlight the necessity of getting enough sleep to wake up strong and clear-minded.
Crucial.
But there was a framing device they used that completely stopped me in my tracks. They described going to bed as a gift to your future self.
That is a phenomenal way to bypass a cognitive glitch we all suffer from.
It really is. Because usually, going to bed early feels like a punishment to my present self.
Right, you're missing out.
Yeah, I have to stop watching my favorite show, I have to turn off my phone, I have to stop consuming. But framing it as a gift feels entirely different. Is there a neurological reason why that specific phrasing works so well?
There absolutely is. In behavioral economics and psychology, there's a concept known as temporal discounting.
Temporal discounting.
It describes our brain's tendency to heavily overvalue immediate rewards, like, say, the dopamine hit of watching another episode on TV, while steeply discounting the value of future rewards, like waking up feeling rested tomorrow morning.
So your brain's reward center struggles to care about the you of tomorrow?
Exactly. Tomorrow's exhaustion just doesn't feel real to the brain tonight.
That explains so much about my nighttime habits.
We all do it.
Yeah.
But by consciously reframing sleep as a gift, you are giving to a friend, remembering that we are trying to treat ourselves as our own best friend.
Right.
You bring that future reward into the present moment.
Oh, that's clever.
You hack the dopamine system by making the act of going to bed an act of active generosity.
Mm.
It turns sleep from passive deprivation into an active positive choice.
Let's build on that idea of rest, because I think we need to address the reality of absolute burnout.
Yeah, when you're running on empty.
Let's say you're so utterly depleted that even reading a picture book feels like too much effort. You're too wired to sleep and your boundaries have already collapsed. What is the absolute lowest barrier to entry for self-care?
The absolute 0 point of effort.
Yes. Leo and Miss provide a solution that is so simple it almost feels radical.
Just sitting quietly.
Just being quiet for 2 to 5 minutes, that is the entire instruction. No book, no music, no phone. You sit in a chair, you look out a window at a tree, and you just breathe.
Yeah.
Leo calls it a small vacation for your brain.
If we look at this through the lens of the listener right now, someone dealing with the realities of modern information overload, this is arguably the most important piece of the entire conversation.
I completely agree, but I also know the immediate pain point here. If I sit down in a chair with no phone and no music, within 30 seconds, my brain is screaming at me to check Slack or refresh my email or look at the news.
Oh, for sure. The itch.
The urge to consume is overwhelming. Why is it so physically uncomfortable to just sit still for 5 minutes?
It's uncomfortable because you're literally experiencing withdrawal from constant novelty.
That withdrawal.
Yeah. We live in an environment where our brains are perpetually classifying, sorting, and reacting to data. Even listening to this deep dive right now is an input.
Right.
When you deliberately choose 0 inputs, you're forcing a transition in the brain. Specifically, you're activating something called the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, I've heard of the default mode network. How does that actually function when we're just staring out a window?
Think of the DMN as the background defragmentation process on a hard drive.
Okay.
It's a network of interacting brain regions that activates only when you are not focused on the outside world. When you stop feeding the brain new tasks, the DMN turns on and starts organizing.
Organizing what?
Everything. It consolidates memories, it connects disparate ideas, and it facilitates creative problem solving. It is doing massive cognitive maintenance.
So if we are constantly consuming inputs, listening to audiobooks while we commute, checking emails while we eat, scrolling before we sleep, we are literally never letting the hard drive defragment.
Never. That is the crisis of the modern attention span. If you run a car engine at maximum RPMs all day without ever letting it idle, it will eventually seize up.
It has to break down.
Right. So taking a 5-minute brain vacation isn't just doing nothing. It is a highly active, biologically necessary reset mechanism for cognitive fatigue. It's the only way your brain can process the backlog of information you've fed it all day.
Okay, so we have all these incredibly accessible tools. Cultivating flow states through tactile hobbies like cooking or gardening, using the firewall of the word no, hacking temporal discounting to get sleep, and activating the default mode network with a 5-minute brain vacation.
A pretty solid toolkit.
But what does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? The dialogue actually tackles the lingering guilt of self-care head-on. They address the persistent idea that focusing on yourself is somehow a selfish act.
The logic they use to dismantle that guilt is undeniable. Focusing on yourself is not selfish, it is a structural necessity.
They state very clearly, if you are tired and stressed, you cannot be a good friend, you cannot be a good worker, and you cannot be a good family member. Miss even admits that when she's tired, she simply isn't very nice.
And no one is. When your internal resources are depleted, your emotional regulation is the very first system to fail.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Your fuse gets incredibly short, and your capacity for empathy basically disappears. By taking care of yourself, you are actually performing a vital service for your community.
They call it a win-win situation. You have more energy, so you have more to give to other people.
It requires a complete paradigm shift. You have to reframe self-care from a self-indulgent luxury into a fundamental moral responsibility.
Wow, a moral responsibility.
Yeah, you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you want to be generous, patient, and kind to the people you interact with, you are obligated to maintain your own cognitive and emotional engine,
So how do we actually start without getting overwhelmed? Because taking on all of this at once just creates another stressful to-do list.
which defeats the whole
Well,
purpose.
exactly. Their call to action is brilliant, they say. Choose just one small thing to start today. Do not try to do everything.
Starting incredibly small is the ultimate defense mechanism against the wellness industry complex we discussed at the beginning. By picking one tiny action, it remains an anchor rather than an obligation.
They suggest listening to one happy song just for you, taking a 5-minute walk, or reading just 2 pages of a book before bed without looking at your phone. They call it planting a small seed for your own happiness.
I love that. And a 2-page reading goal is almost impossible to fail at.
It really removes the pressure of perfection. You are just casting a single vote for your own well-being.
Exactly.
Let's review the journey we've mapped out today. We started with the psychological trick of becoming your own best friend to bypass your inner critic.
Right.
We explored how to find transient hypofrontality in tactile hobbies, discovering that even chopping vegetables can quiet a racing mind. We looked at the firewall of boundaries, the dopamine hack of giving sleep as a gift to your future self, and the neurobiological necessity of the 5-minute brain vacation to let your hard drive defragment.
It really is a masterclass in the science of simplicity.
We curated this specific deep dive for you today because we know how aggressively loud the world is right now. You don't need a 14-step routine to find peace. You don't need to buy a color-coded planner.
Right.
You just need to understand how your brain works and give it the quiet moments it requires to function.
And as you move forward with the rest of your day, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own. We talk extensively about boundaries and protecting your cognitive RAM.
Yeah.
So if you were truly acting as your own best friend right now, and you were looking honestly at your schedule for the rest of the day,
Yeah.
wait, actually, what is the one thing you would give yourself permission to completely cancel?
Take a look at that schedule and remember, sometimes the most profound, scientifically backed self-care looks exactly like sitting in a chair, doing absolutely nothing, and just taking a single, simple breath.